Hey everyone! In this video I'm going to give you a method of game development that Vlambeer uses to develop games such as Ridiculous Fishing and Nuclear Throne. All of this information has come from various talks, interviews and articles that I have researched. From all of the research, I've developed a few steps that you may find useful in order to develop a game idea, prototype it and then polish it over time so you have a final product. The idea phase is the first step. Coming up with something that you can begin prototyping. When it comes to generating ideas, Vlambeer like to use not only game references, but real-life experiences, movies, basically any experience. When they developed Ridiculous Fishing, a game where you fling fish into the air and shoot them with machine guns, they were watching a documentary about fishing and discussing duck hunt. This led to them prototyping flinging fish into the air and shooting them, and after many iterations of going through the development loop, they made Ridiculous Fishing. Take inspiration from all experiences. Games aren't the only source of inspiration, and usually the more experiences that you have, the more you can remix. Everything is a remix is another part of this equation. I'll put a link to the video in the description, but the core idea is that you have three elements of creativity. We can copy, transform and combine ideas to produce any type of creative work. Most great games that you see have successfully combined multiple ideas which come from experiences the developer had. This allows them to produce something really interesting and with unique mechanics. So make sure to have lots of experiences of different things if you want to come up with great ideas. Apart from just coming up with these ideas, you'll also want to test them and rapidly. Prototyping is a process where you can take an idea and implement it in a few hours or days depending on your skill level and the scope of the idea. A good rule is the 444 rule. This comes from a talk Rami gave about game jams and the development of their games. If you have 48 hours to make a game, you should only take 4 hours to develop the game and 44 hours to polish the game. Vlambeer believed that the best way for indies to develop games is to take the very core experience of your game and develop that in the smallest amount of time possible. Rami also mentioned that you can take the time it takes to develop the core of the game and times it by 10. You can see this in games such as Superhot, Devil Daggers and Cluster Truck. I personally believe that this is a great idea as indie developers are limited in resources in terms of team members, money and time. We don't want to be developing extra content and be stuck adding content all the time. We want a strong core experience that we can polish and turn into a great commercial product. So remember to come up with your idea and then prototype it within a few days. If the game is enjoyable and other people like it, then add a few extra months on top of those days in order to polish the game. You may be onto the next Super Crate Box, Cluster Truck or Superhot. Now I mentioned to polish the game, but what does that really mean? From Vlambeer's perspective, it means to go through the loop. The loop is a concept that Rami brought up, developed by a man named Jesse Schell. The idea is that you take an idea, conceptualize it, implement it, and then evaluate it. Polishing the game means to go through this loop as many times as possible before you release. Whilst going through this loop, take away everything that does not support the core of the game. Vlambeer believes that good design is when you can't take away anymore. Most people try to add features and complexity. This is what leads to feature creep, which makes your project scope blow up, causing massive amounts of stress on the developers and potentially destroying your project. Go back to that idea of developing the core experience of your game in a matter of days and then build everything around that. Superhot was developed in 7 days at the 7-day FPS Game Jam. The game was enjoyable and playable in the state at the jam. By spending the time going through the loop, polishing the game, and focusing on keeping the core, they were able to make a very high quality, successful indie game that didn't have extra unnecessary features. The more features you have in a game, the less times you'll be able to go through the loop. As an indie game developer, we don't usually have the resources to make a massive game, as that would stop us going through the loop and developing a great game. And that's it. Let's recap. So the first thing is to get great ideas by experiencing the world, movies, games, books, and music. The second part is to develop a prototype of your idea in a few days. Make sure that it's the core of the game and that you've taken anything that doesn't support the core of the game out. Make sure also that you enjoy the prototype and that others do as well before committing to months or years of development. And finally, go through the loop as many times as possible before release. I would also like to add that this isn't exclusively for indie games. You can see these concepts in games such as Shadow of the Colossus. They took away everything and focused purely on the epic boss battles, allowing them to polish everything to an insane level of detail. Thanks for watching everyone. This has been the Vlambeer method for games development. I really like this method and have implemented a lot of the concepts into my own game development methods. I hope you got something useful from this video, and remember that this is only one developer's ways of doing things. Everyone does it in a different way, and the idea, as Bruce Lee said, is to absorb what is useful and discard what is useless. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting me on Patreon. If you'd like to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.